Craig Tim.
Thank you and good morning. Again, we can't thank our sponsors enough. It's always a great partnership, and we are very happy to be here. You may have heard there is an election coming up, I think, in a couple of words. I heard that last night on television. But if you are a member of protective services or a member of the military or a veteran, if you would just raise your hand. As we get started, as we always do, if you would stand if you're able, and let's honor America with our pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. So today's session is going to be very similar to ones we've had in the past, but everyone will have an opportunity to ask questions as we go. We're going to start, introduce a good friend of mine from Synergy. She's going to share a few words with us. And then I'm going to have, you can stay at your seats, each of the elected officials just introduce yourselves so we get to know you. And then we get to invite up our special guests, and they get to sit at the high tops, and then we get to send all kinds of questions their way. So it's my pleasure to introduce Angel Laidlaw, like laying down the law, she told me. She is the president and the chief executive officer of Synergy. Good morning, Angel.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that great introduction. Just want to talk a little bit about Synergy and our upcoming advocacy event. So Synergy is our regional economic development organization that serves the 5 counties in central Wisconsin that include Wood County. And one of our big priority areas each year is to really look at advocacy and what our business community needs. We made this such a pillar of focus that we have several committee meetings and sessions leading up to what we call Central Wisconsin Days. It's one of the only regional events that are hosted by entities such as ours, where we bring individuals down to the Capitol and we advocate for issues that impact our region. Last year we covered things such as childcare, housing. Specifically this upcoming year we will be addressing rural housing, as many programs are not rural friendly, and I know there's many of our rural partners here today. So I'd like to ask you guys to save the date for April 9th and 10th this upcoming year, and watch for our emails, and make sure to definitely support and check out the Chamber as they're one of our sponsors for the event. So thank you so much for coming today, and we look forward to all the topics.
Thank you very much. So there's no special way to do this. I would just like to ask any elected official if you would just identify yourself. We'd love just to kind of just for a second say who you are and who you represent. And I know there's a few out there. So who would like to start?
Lance Plumel, I'm the Wood County Board Chairman.
Bill Clendane, I'm on the Grand Rapids Town Board and also the Wood County Board.
Matt Zacher, Mayor, Wisconsin Rapids.
Sean Becker, Wood County Sheriff.
I'm Schober, County Board Supervisor, City Councilman.
Julie Stratton, School District, Pittsville.
Chris Inda, Wisconsin Rapids School Board.
Elizabeth St. Myers, Wisconsin Rapids School Board.
Marianne Lippert, Pittsville School Board.
Thank you very much. Let's give them a round of applause.
I'm J.D. Vance on the...
Derek, the beard's the wrong color. So.
And surprise Congressman, you get to sit at the big boys table here in a second. So.
Okay.
Going to invite up State Senator Patrick Teston. State Representative, hey, I'm doing pretty well, Scott. I didn't call you a congressman for the last 2 or 3 years.
Well, I'm glad you didn't. You would have yelled at me.
Yeah, that would have been kind of embarrassing. Representative Scott Krug, U.S. Congressman Derek Van Orden, and Mayor Matt Zacher. Come on up, you get to sit at the big boys table.
What do you mean by big?
What do you want?
Over there would be awesome. So Pat and Scott, you just automatically always sit next to each other, is that kind of?
Yeah, pretty much. That's what our wives always yell at us for too.
So again, thank you so much for being here. We're going to be fairly informal, but what we would like to start with, and my friends at the chamber are going to help with the time, we want to explore a lot of different topics today and also give our audience, and thank you all for being here. This was one of our largest ever turnouts, which is awesome.
Yeah, he's.
Get a chance to ask questions. So why don't we just, in ease, we'll start with Mayor Zacher. If you want to just take about a couple of minutes, just kind of what you're working on, things you see going on in the city of Rapids, maybe some projects that are coming up, and we'll kind of kick it off, and we'll head down the road here.
Good, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Projects going on. Lots of stuff happening. Try to keep everybody up to speed on the mill and what's happening there. A lot of things are going to be going on right now. It's in demolition phase, getting all the asbestos out of the buildings as they come through. The nice thing is that MRD did purchase that outright, so that they have to take it all down in order for them to regain the money that they put into it and make their profit off of it. So that sets us up in a really good position to make sure that it goes away 100%, because there's a lot of people that are lining up, a lot of big businesses to take a look at that 250 acres and all the other outlying areas that are there. So that's exciting. We do have that grant out there that we're looking at, trying to relocate those railroad tracks again. But we're making some headway with that, so it's going to be a big one. Something exciting coming up to the Christmas time will be the bridge lighting. The bridge lighting is going to be in that area, so we're looking forward to that. Lighting that up for everyone at the same time as Christmas is coming to us. So feel free to call me anytime with questions about what's going on, and happy to talk to you, meet with you anywhere you're at. So appreciate it. Thanks for coming this morning.
Okay, Congressman, again, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. Lots going on everywhere. Whatever you'd like to kind of fill us in on.
Okay, well, it's great to be here. Thanks for the Chamber for sponsoring this. I was really happy to get the U.S. Chamber of Commerce endorsement. It's the last week or so. I'd like to bend things out real quick for you. My committee assignments. I'm on the Agriculture Committee, the Veterans Affairs Committee, and the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. T&I, the biggest thing that we've been doing, or that I've been doing, is get more rail inspectors so our trains quit falling off the tracks. That's kind of a big deal. Doesn't matter where the track is if the train falls off. It's a thing. We are adamantly opposed to, and have been vigorously making sure that the Biden administration does not implement the WOTUS, which is the Waters of the United States, because anybody here that moves anything or builds anything or farms anything will be out of business if that goes through. That is a Green New Deal project, and it is absolutely horrible. A puddle in the park, or the parking lot right here, if that fills up with water, that will be considered a navigable waterway by the federal government, and it will shut down everything you got, so that's out. Veterans Affairs Committee, we've got a whole bunch of legislation through. I focus mostly on National Guard men and women in the Transition Assistance Program to help veterans quit killing themselves, quite frankly. They lose your uniform, your rank, your title, half your paycheck or your whole paycheck when you transition to a civilian. So my focus has been on that, getting men and women meaningful lives after we get out of the military. Biggest thing in the Agriculture Committee that affects Wisconsin. I'm the first member of the delegation to be on the Ag Committee in over a decade. I did that on purpose. It's the only committee that I lobbied to get on in Congress. We're trying to get the Farm Bill through. We passed a bipartisan Farm Bill through the committee last year, and the Democrat-controlled Senate refuses to give us their language. So here's the problem. The FAR bill expired September 30th. Is everyone aware of this? It expired September 30th. If we don't have something done by January 1st, we'll revert back to permanent law, like 1954. The dairy industry in the entire nation will be destroyed within about a week because it'll cost $25 for a gallon of milk. And if you guys track this stuff, I know there's a lot of business-friendly stuff in the continuing resolution. I voted against it to put a shot over the bow because no one else is paying attention to this. Our agricultural industry will be decimated if we don't get something through by January 1st, and I refuse to gamble with our farmers. Other than that, it's a beautiful day. Thanks for having us. A little bit of a drive last night, but I'm here for you guys. If you, hey, Johnny, you're in the back, right?
Yeah.
Tom, Johnny, everybody, and Scott, that's official and political stuff. If you want to talk to anybody, please do. God bless you.
Thank you. And Scott Krug, you've proven that you do not need facial hair to be on this panel.
That's a good thing, I can't prove it anyways. Like right here is like a bald spot, it just doesn't work.
By the way, we've known each other for how many years? Like,
Yeah,
I can kind of get away with it.
Yeah, we've known each other way too long now. I was actually gonna boo when they introduced him as moderator. I will next time, Good morning, Scott Krug, State Representative of the 72nd Assembly District. In case you all haven't figured that out, the lines have changed significantly in everybody's assembly districts. So who may have been your rep earlier may not be your rep anymore. So my district stayed, Southwood County is stayed, thankfully. I used to represent Western Washera County, that's all gone. So I lose all Colombo, Plainfield, Hancock, Watoma, lose all my beans, peas, carrots, corn, I mean all that stuff that I helped all those folks with over the years, making sure they could produce. It's gone. But now picking up northern Juneau County, I've switched my agriculture focus from peas, beans, corn, and carrots to cows and cranberries. So my district is still a really big ag district, just entirely different than it was. So even after 14 years, I've got quite a learning curve ahead of me this next session. Start learning issues more about cows and cranberries than I have about anything else. And in case you haven't heard, there is an election coming up. Craig mentioned it. And 2 years ago, I volunteered to become the chairman of the campaign and elections committee, just because I had seen all of this stuff going on, right? All this argument, all this fighting, all of the consternation, all of the theories of everything happening election-wise. So I've taken literally the entire last 2 years, and it literally is an everyday job at this point, to try to help re-educate people all across the district, across the state, about how safe and secure our elections are, understanding that there are things that we can still fix, but for the most part to make sure everybody understands that there's trust and confidence in the system, so you actually go out and vote. I don't care who you vote for. If you don't vote for me, that's great. I want to make sure you vote. Yeah, it's a great campaign slogan. Yeah, right. I just want to make sure everybody understands that your ability to vote is paramount to the discussions we're having at the Capitol. It's not political. It's not who's saying what and how and who gets a leg up because of what we're working on. It's making sure you feel safe, secure, and understand that you can cast your vote if it makes a difference. Every day now until election day is one of my worst nightmares because that is my job to see fires come up across the state of Wisconsin where people are fighting about an election-related thing, calling out to that local clerk or that local municipality or saying, okay, what's going on, let me explain it, take the information back, get it back out to folks. So yeah, the next 2 weeks of the election isn't so much for me knocking on doors and campaigning now as much as it is trying to make sure that the system remains intact and trustworthy. So that is the whole thing I'm working on. People used to ding me all the time because legislators don't often have to work in the summer because we campaign every other summer, right? This is probably the first time in several sessions that there's not been a day off, right? I mean, there are some days that, it is nonstop talking election stuff from anywhere and everybody across the state. Besides election stuff, I'm also on the Housing and Real Estate Committee because I'm also a real nerd like everybody else in this room. Oh, most of us anyway. But that is a really important thing to me is to make sure that housing remains affordable, that people can actually achieve the American dream of owning a home, to work towards those goals, and help people understand that policies can be put in place that can help spur development, that can help keep affordability, and help us get on the right track here with our housing problems that we're facing here in central Wisconsin. So lots going on. I'm looking forward to getting back to work after this election's over in a couple of weeks and getting some policies ready for the next state budget. So if you've got ideas for that, MSTC, If you got any ideas, let us know. It's time to start putting together the next state budget soon. And I'll turn it over to my favorite state senator. This is on joint finance, that's why I say that.
Well, great to see everyone, and unlike Scott, I'm not a realtor, and I am asking you for your vote on November 5th. I've got some really bad news for all of you in this room. So unfortunately, in 18 days, everyone's favorite season in Wisconsin is going to be over. Election season. Oh, I know, that's a bad joke. So obviously right now, as Scott kind of alluded to, with the new legislative maps, there's a lot of attention right now because our majorities are at risk in both the state Senate and the state assembly. So for my legislative district, I went from having all of Portage County to just a portion of Portage County, went from having most of Wood County with the exception of Marshfield to just southern Wood County. Got completely taken out of Waushara County, picked up more of Adams County to include Adams and Friendship. Picked up most of Juneau County, so what's great is former Governor Thompson's now a constituent. The downside is he calls you and lets you know that he's a constituent, which is awesome. And maintained the eastern half of Monroe County and then picked up all of Jackson County. So like Krug lost a lot of our potato and vegetable growers, but now picked up more cranberry growers. So it's a win-win in my book, I guess. Right now, obviously, you know, as we get ready for the next session, we're taking a lot of look at the state budget. And so just this week, new revenue estimates came in. We're looking at a projected $4.5 billion surplus going into this next biennium. Our rainy day funds just shy of $2 billion. So from a fiscal standpoint, the state's doing is in a really good position. Now, this is where I'm going to ask my favorite congressman to plug his ears. We're doing a lot better than the federal government right now when it comes to fiscal policy. That should be.
That is no secret.
But you know, obviously, when you've got a surplus like that, just like last session, when we started off the session with a nearly $7 billion surplus, we have to manage expectations, making sure that of that new revenue, what is able to be invested long term. Because a lot of times with high inflation, we're seeing increases in our revenue tax collections, which that is not oftentimes a long-term solution. So when we talk about things like infrastructure or trying to provide tax relief, I think that is the number one issue that I've been hearing. I'm sure Representative Krug, Congressman Van Orden are all hearing the same, is that people are really struggling right now, more than they were 4 or 5 years ago. And put it in perspective, just about a couple months ago, I was here in Wisconsin Rapids going door to door, as we often do during campaign season, and had a conversation with a woman here in town who still works on fixed income, but is literally making decisions as to whether or not she puts gas in her tank or put food on her table. Now, I don't know about all of you in this room, but in the year of 2024, I find it highly unacceptable. And so my hope is as we go into this next biennium is that we can find a way and work with the Evers administration and actually get some significant tax relief done. You know, this was something that he had championed in the budget we sent him back in 2022. We tried to address this issue in this last budget, providing tax relief for every tax filer here in the state of Wisconsin. Unfortunately, 95% of those tax cuts were vetoed. And then we tried different approaches. In fact, 3 different times doing standalone bills. And in the last session, at the tail end of the last session, we tried providing income tax relief specifically for the middle class, using the governor's metrics and definition of what the middle class family is. Unfortunately, that bill got vetoed. We tried providing an increase for the marriage tax credit. Unfortunately, that got vetoed. We tried making sure that retirement incomes for individuals who are retired and filed jointly up to $150,000 would be tax exempt. Unfortunately, that got vetoed. The one silver lining is in all this, the one bill that was signed into law dealt with the child care independent tax credit, to mirror that of the federal tax credit. That one got signed into law. And so when we talk about issues like child care, which was obviously a hot topic last session, where there was a lot of criticism made of the Republican legislature where we didn't continue the one-time federal funds of child care accounts. Instead, we took a different approach, trying to provide families through the tax credit, through other standalone bills, the PALS program, which actually increases child care slots, but making sure that we're just not throwing good money after bad and throwing a Band-Aid on a broken leg and expecting to fix the problem. So I do think that's going to be one of these areas where Synergy, the Chamber, and others, we're going to have some serious conversations on how we can be creative, trying to find public-private partnerships to address this, because you know, we hear it all across, not just in the 24th Senate District, but around the state, where these child care deserts are a real hurdle of entry into the workforce. And so that's one of those areas where I think we have an opportunity to address in this next biennium, and a whole host of other areas. So as Scott mentioned, this is the time now to sit down with your lawmakers when we're gearing up for the next budget, because it's going to come quick. The governor will likely give his budget address sometime in January, February, and then after that, the Joint Finance Committee, we're going to be horses out of the gate, going around the state getting feedback. And so if you've got ideas, comments, questions, concerns, now's the time to get in touch with us and share your thoughts.
Okay, I think we have a couple of questions. We'll start with you, Pat, and the other direction. There is a shortage of healthcare workers. We hear that a lot and see it in a lot of the media across various sectors, and it's a concern in upcoming years. Just wondering what you're hearing in Madison or in Washington or even in the city for healthcare and kind of battling that issue.
Well, as the vice chair of the Senate Health Committee and someone who chaired that committee for the previous two sessions, this is workforce in our healthcare arena has been at the forefront on my radar and my agenda since I entered the legislature. And when you look at the Wisconsin Hospital Association Workforce Report, it paints a pretty dire picture of the number of shortages of physicians that we have, nurses that we have, even entry-level positions such as CNAs. So when we talk about the ripple effects of what the workforce has, when you talk about individuals staying in hospitals longer because they can't get to a post-acuity facility, like a nursing home, because they don't have CNAs, that's a real struggle. Now, in this last budget, we increased the number of residencies at the Medical College of Wisconsin for psychiatry, which is a huge need, because mental health, we hear about the shortages for child psychiatrists, waiting lists upwards of 2 or 3 years. We need to do more when it comes to increasing the compensation for our nurse educators, because we know in our technical college system as well as our 4-year system, there are bottlenecks within some of these programs and long waiting lists. And it's really hard to justify these professionals when you can go out and be a traveling nurse or a traveling CNA and you're making upwards of $90 to $100 an hour to then transition into a nurse educator position where it pays a fraction of that. And so I think these are some of these investments that we need to take a look at and address, and then from outside of that, from the education pipelines, looking at what we can do to empower providers. I have been the sponsor of the Advanced Practice Registered Nurse Act bill for the last 2 sessions. Unfortunately, every session has been vetoed by the governor, and as a result, Wisconsin has become an island where our APRNs, like our nurse anesthetists who work in our critical access hospitals, where oftentimes there aren't anesthesiologists actually practicing there, we basically have slapped cuffs on these providers to do the job that they are trying to do, which is take care of patients. Wisconsin is one of a handful of states that doesn't allow these highly trained professionals to operate at the highest level of their scope of practice. Our neighbors in Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois all do. And as a result, for some of our systems that border places like Minnesota and Iowa, they're going to those states, and we're losing out on those providers. And so we're going to be working with stakeholders on that bill again to get that reintroduced. I'm hoping we're going to have a better outcome. But that's one of the things that I think a lot of people need to understand is that when you have a bill like that, sometimes it takes multiple sessions to get done. The Rural Dentistry Scholarship Program that I authored with Representative Kurtz, it took us 6 years to get that done before the governor finally signed it into law, making sure that we're getting dentists to practice in underserved areas, which the vast majority of Wisconsin counties are dental deserts. But now that program's up and running, and we're going to have residencies coming into places like Wood County, Adams County, which is a win-win, because they can build up successful and long-standing practices right here in central Wisconsin.
Representative Krug, anything to add to that?
Well, I tell you, that answer makes me want to vote for this guy. We all have our expertise in the legislature, and healthcare is not mine, so I will pass. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Congressman, from a federal level, anything to?
Well, I got to start with state. So everyone knows that the HSHS closed.
Yeah.
You guys hear about that?
Yeah.
I'm going to clear the air here. I had 1 hour notice before that happened. As did Senator Johnson, as did Senator Baldwin, as did Congressman Tiffany. So how that was handled, the withdrawal of those hospitals here was absolutely, completely unprofessional. And I'm not going to make excuses for those cats. What I've done from the federal level is I've introduced a bill to get rid of the artificially established radius for critical access hospitals. So if you have healthcare within a certain radius, they say you cannot have a critical access hospital. I think that's junk. The things that come with critical access hospital designation is you have reduced pharmaceutical costs and a bunch of other great things, so that's going through. The big thing that we are going to stop is the minimum manning for RNs in treatment facilities that take care, of elder care, long-term health care. Are you guys familiar with this? The federal government said you're going to have X amount of RNs in our nursing homes, and if you don't meet this minimum, you're essentially going to have to close. And what the people in those big marble buildings in Washington, D.C. don't understand is that we simply have a dearth of RNs. So if this goes through, which it's not going to because we're fighting it tooth and nail, we'd have to close a lot of our rural healthcare facilities, our nursing homes and advanced healthcare facilities for our elders. So that is not going to happen. From the federal level, that's fine. I mean, we can talk about Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement and all that stuff all day long, but those are the two big things. One, we are having issues in Chippewa Valley now with medical health care, and then the biggest thing for our nursing homes is the Republican-held House is not going to allow this mandate to go through for minimum manning for nurses. It sounds like a great idea, but it will literally close with 40% of our nursing homes overnight.
I don't know, on a city perspective, are you hearing anything from your world?
Well, I can talk to what I am experiencing in the last 6 months since I got elected. Pretty quick off the bat, there's the question of our EMS services getting overwhelmed with call volume is the main thing. And that kind of plays out in where the EMS system, call 911, get an ambulance there to go to the hospital, is kind of being taken advantage of in the way that people don't want to necessarily go to the hospital directly because of the shortage of people that are there, so they'll wait 6, 8, 10 hours trying to see a doctor, whereas if they call an ambulance, they go through the emergency room and they get seen immediately. So it's not necessarily a fair way to treat the system, but at the same time, it kind of is what it's evolved into at this point. And then on top of that, you have the apex of the baby boom generation right now. So you have so many people that are in that age of their lives where they need this help and these services. And that's only going to continue on for the next, 10, 20, 30 years or so. So to be able to figure out what that whole problem is, I'm trying to bring together the people in the community, the county, the surrounding areas that play into the system and come to some solutions together as to how to deal with it. Is it bringing on a whole slew of more highly qualified paramedics and firefighters in order to handle these calls, when a lot of these calls are not necessarily emergency calls. And in that sense, then we have to come to an agreement together as to how we move forward and how we share that money and the expenses of that, because the entire system is under stress right now, as we know. So, thank you.
I'm going to stay on your end there, Matt. I'll check the other way. I think you figured out this thing there.
That's all right.
We talk about investment, high growth industries, et cetera, anything that you're aware of or anything you're hearing where we can kind of offer incentives to maybe get some of those, the clean energy, advanced manufacturing, healthcare, biotech, any of that? Are you hearing anything on the city for Rapids and the greater?
I guess
the whole area?
The only thing I can speak to right now is just the amount of folks that are coming in. I'm kind of terming the mill as an industrial park now, and what that turns into, because there's going to be anywhere from 3 to 15 businesses most likely in there or more. And in that sense, we have to deal with our own incentive program. I don't know enough. Kyle Kearns would have more information on that, because he does a real good job of getting into the ins and outs of what's going on at the state level and federal level. And really right now we're talking about the world stage in terms of the people that are coming in and looking at the machinery and the buildings and the land. And in the end, it's really the power that they're after, the ability to get cheap power, because we just have an abundance of it because the big machines aren't running right now. So that'll help us, be able to fill those needs and bring in employment, and I'm assuming the incentives will follow that as things kind of ramp up here as the mill comes down, the craft mill comes down. So.
Congressman, anything to share on that?
Okay, from the federal level, And I've got 19 counties, it's like about 13,000 square miles in the 3rd district. And the common themes that I hear are labor and input costs. The big issue with labor, it doesn't really truly matter what the unemployment rate is if you have over 7 million people that have voluntarily removed themselves from the labor pool. And that's what happened. Who here runs a business? Raise your hand. Who here could do more business if you had more people? Yeah, okay, well, that's everybody. So there's an issue. We've set, from the federal level, a system of, we set conditions so that people do not feel compelled to enter into the labor pool. And I've been supporting myself since I was 16 years old. And people do need help, they do, at times, but we have to re-engage the American population to get to work. The federal side, as far as immigration, we absolutely have to have folks come here legally to work. If we don't have immigrant labor in the United States, our dairy industry, construction, and leisure industry, and hospitality will all close overnight. And you all know that's true. So we need to have people come here legally. I'm on the agriculture. I'm the biggest Navy SEAL nerd you've ever met in my life. So I'm on the agricultural labor working group on purpose because this is a big deal to farmers. So we're trying to make sure the H-2A program works functionally. So it's not seasonal because a hog's going to keep growing and a cow is going to need to be milked much longer than 3 months in a row, right? So that's the labor side. The other side is with the input costs. The Biden administration, and this is not a political statement, it's a factual statement, blew through so much money, they introduced capital into a market with scarcity. What does that lead to? Inflation, right? That's what's happened. So when we talk about housing and all these things, you can't buy a piece of wood or a screw or a nut or a bolt, and you can't afford to pay the workers anymore. So the developers that I speak to are holding back on doing new construction because they can't afford to do it because the margins are so slim. So when you get a real estate agent, like I guess everybody here, right? So your inventory is going to go down because you don't have new things built, and the reason being is that the federal government can't seem to run the budget. So what we're working on, and I want you to know, this is the first year in a very long period of time because of the Limit Save Grow Act that we passed. It's the first year in a long time we've spent less money year over year. And we are not driving a motorcycle, which I do. We're steering an aircraft carrier. The speed of the federal government is incredibly frustrating because a snail would smoke check those guys. But we are moving in the right direction. And I just want one quick plug, again, with the staff back here, if you guys have individual issues, please bring it up to my staff. Mayor Scott back there, the official guy, and we'll work on things in DC for you if you bring it to our attention.
Scott, any incentive, that type of thing on the state level?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I grew up in a middle-class family.
Have you changed your bumper sticker?
Yeah, I'm gonna keep changing.
Please vote for me.
Yeah,
I don't care.
When it comes to incentives for employers, I mean, there's two guys sitting at this table that did everything humanly possible, right? I mean, we literally wrote a bill to save a manufacturer in Wisconsin Rapids, put it on the governor's desk, and got the red pen of death. Like, it's so incredibly frustrating when you take the time to go through all the process we went through, to get the promises we received, and then to get that and turn around and, just flush it, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. So one of the challenges remaining, besides, trying to figure out how to get that red pen to turn black a little bit more and get a signature on the bill, is we've got to address workforce issues before we address employment issues, I think. It is a struggle, and honestly, it would have been a struggle to keep that mill operating with the workforce that we've had in place at the time. We've got to figure out ways that technology can match up with the workforce, and Mid-State Technical College here does an incredible job, whether it's here in Rapids, Point, Adams, wherever. And that's why I've been on the College and Universities Committee for the last 12 years, just making sure that we do everything to build our workforce to be ready for 21st century jobs, right? I mean, it doesn't escape me that a lot of the jobs that we lost in this area were instrumentation type jobs from machinery and technologies that were created in the 1970s and 1980s. I mean, we would have had to really invest about $500 million into that plant to keep it functional and operational for the next 50 years. So, double-edged sword, right? We've got to figure out a way to make those investments. We've got to make sure that employers see us as a place that they can come and create opportunities, but they also need to be able to get their products out of an area. That's one of the problems we have in central Wisconsin too, is Wisconsin Rapids is pretty landlocked from that interstate, right? So we've got an even bigger struggle here in our area to try to recruit major employers, industrial employers, and to have a workforce ready for them. So there's a big job ahead of us these next 2 years, incentivizing individuals to get back into the workforce, to train for the right jobs for the 21st century, and at the same time telling employers, hey, central Wisconsin is a place you want to live, work, play, and stay. So I mean, when we talk real estate, and I pick on all of us because most of us are in real estate, but I pick on us a little bit because, I mean, we're actually on the front lines of that, right? We're out in their community every day trying to talk people into moving into Wisconsin Rapids, tell them why it's such a great community to live in, tell them all the amenities we have, and it is not a hard job to convince people to live in Wisconsin Rapids. Even without the manufacturing base we used to have, even without the employers' opportunities that we used to have, housing inventory is at an historic low still in Wisconsin Rapids because it is an incredible place to live. So now we got to capitalize on that and incentivize employers a little bit. And yeah, we're going to do some of that state surplus money to try to drive some of that investment to get people to come here to open a manufacturing facility in the industrial area that we're talking about now. So we've got to get creative again, but at the same time, we've got to figure out how to get our friends on the other side of the aisle to help us get bills signed even after we put them forward, and they are bipartisan.
Yeah, I think Scott brought a good point as far as taking a look at economic development and tying that in for workforce development. And it's no secret our aging demographics here in the state. I've been talking about this since even before I got elected, that it is going to present some significant challenges. And with birth rates not being where they should be since the 1970s, we're behind the 8 ball right now.
Hey, I've done my part.
I have not.
It's not that hard, Dad.
And one of the things that we did in this last budget, and I've been a huge proponent of, is the youth apprenticeship program. And I know a lot of our school districts around the state do a phenomenal job, and highlight one in particular, Spash. They really have hit a home run where this past year was one of their largest youth apprenticeship classes that they've had since their inception. We must have had over 75 or 100 youth apprenticeships, and there was an appreciation breakfast where the employers came in, the parents were there, and we're really getting these kids hands-on experience and allowing our employers to invest in the workforce right here at home. I take a look at employers like Martin Machine or Point Precision. I mean, they have individuals who have been in their employment since the youth apprenticeship program was first founded back in the early 90s, which Wisconsin was a leader of. And in this last budget, we doubled that investment, which I would love to double it again going into the next biennium, because that's where I think we're really going to set ourselves apart. Outside of that, when you take a look at just some of the economic development things that are going on, I mean, we were able to get a TID bill passed with the city of Stevens Point for a potential new potato processor called the Bristow, which has the opportunity to expand our acreage of potatoes grown with a new variety that's never been grown in North America before by 15 to 20,000 acres.
Wait, he signed a bill?
He did. Oh, I know. I would love to have a mill bill signed, but you know, he wasn't seeing it that day. But you know, it's investments like that, and then outside of that, talking about the housing. I mean, we did a $500 million housing package in this last state budget dealing with affordable housing. And one of the components of some of these bills, we're making sure that, you know, we've had programs in the past where oftentimes they get gobbled up by developers in the bigger cities like Madison, Milwaukee, the Green Bays, the Fox Valleys of the world. And then there's nothing left for places like Wisconsin Rapids or Central Wisconsin or Northern or Western. And making sure that we're setting a percentage aside of that money to make sure it's going to outstate. Making sure, because guess what? Yep, Madison's grown faster than any other municipality in the state of Wisconsin, but we have employers right here who are looking for workers, but if you can't find a place to live, what is the likelihood you're going to fill that position? You're not. And so by getting creative, thinking outside the box, what we did in this last session, I think is going to help move the needle. And I'm hoping as these programs come online and we're seeing the results, it's going to make a strong case for us to further those investments. And again, to highlight Mid-State, you know, the Medicine, what an incredible opportunity here where employers are seeing this, and they're reaching out and saying that this is great. And I think it's partnerships like that that are really going to help set us apart and show just why places like Central Wisconsin are such a great place to invest in. And the more we can share our story, I know it's tough for some of us because we're Wisconsinites and we like to be humble and not braggadocious about what we have going on here. But we really have to get on our soapbox with a megaphone and talk about what we've got going on here, because if we don't, no one's going to do it for us.
Thank you. We're going to open it up for questions from the audience, but before we do that, we'll start with Pat, have the other way. You all represent certain areas, districts, etc. Just a couple, don't take a lot of time, but just what makes you do that? Why are you proud to do that? When you wake up every morning and say, I'm representing a certain group of people in a certain part of the world, what are you most proud of?
Well, I tell people I got into this because I absolutely love getting yelled at on a daily basis. All jokes aside, no, I
only from your colleagues in the House?
I wish. No, but honestly, it is such a privilege to represent the 24th Senate District, and what I've always enjoyed about this job is that no 2 days are the same. I mean, if you would have asked me when I first came into my role as a state senator in 2017, I'd be at the forefront of working on healthcare policy in the state senate, I would say you're absolutely nuts, because that was one of those areas I knew absolutely nothing about. But it sparked, I had an interest sparked in me in my first state budget that I didn't know existed. And it's just great to go out in the communities, talk to people. Through my on-the-jobs here, is getting to different jobs. One of the last ones I did, I got to work at Wisconsin River Meats down in Boston. Now, granted, it's a meat store, but I felt like a kid in a candy store because I'm, helping make sausages, brats, hanging sides of beef, hanging up whole hogs. I mean, it was just absolutely, it was a blast. And like I tell anyone who's running for public office, it's one of those jobs no one gives you a handbook and tells you this is what makes you a good legislator or elected official. And you get out of it what you put into it. And for those who are willing to roll up their sleeves and get dirty, literally and figuratively, it is a blast. And like I told my wife, if I ever find myself walking in the state capitol and I'm shaking my head, asking myself, what in God's name am I doing this for? That's going to be the high sign to find something else to do. But it hasn't come yet, so I'm hoping I'll get a chance to go back in January.
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it quick. I mean, I've been here my whole life, right? I mean, you grew up here and you see the things that happen. My dad was almost employee number one of all the mass layoffs that Wisconsin Rapids faced. He worked at Freeway from the time he graduated high school in the 70s until the time they closed in the late 80s, early 90s. And that was the tipping point. Freeway went, Constable went, Schneider Trucking went. I mean, just seeing that and living that and being part of it my entire life in this area, it kind of drove me to want to do the things I want to do, stand up and fight for my community. I graduated from Lincoln, graduated from Mid-State here. I mean, the other part of it growing up is my 4th grade field trip. And that's why I tell schools all the time, bring those kids down there. Show them what it is, show them what it can be, show them the excitement of what it's like to be in that building every day, like Pat mentioned. And I was always told by, Tommy Thompson's always told me that the day you're driving up East Wash and the Capitol's behind you and you're more excited it's behind you than when you're coming in and East Wash and it's in front of you, that's the time to be done, right? You want to be excited going into that building every day, and I still am. And Mary Ann will appreciate this. When I was growing up, we used to go to the 4th of July parade in Pittsville every year. Every year when I was a kid. My grandparents, we had the post office corner blocked up. It was our family corner, right? And every year you'd see Donnie Hasselhoff walking down Main Street and talking to every single person in Pittsville. And every single Pittsville person, it just that personal touch. Republican, Democrat didn't matter then. It didn't matter. It was because he was there and he was part of the community and people were excited to see him. And that was another thing that really drove me into wanting to be a part of public service, is just being able to have that connection with people in my community. So there's so many origin stories. It is going to be super hard to cut the cord at some point. But that point will come soon, regardless of what Pat says. We do have to leave at some point, right? But that's why I do it. It's because I'm from here and I want to advocate for the things that matter.
Congressman?
I have been a protector and a servant my entire life. I did that in the SEAL teams for almost 30 years. And our country's in a tight spot right now. And I was raised in abject rural poverty on food stamps, and I didn't support myself since I was 16. So I know what it's like I know what it's like when things are bad, and things are bad now. And I have the wherewithal to try to make things better, and that's what I'm doing.
I appreciate all you guys doing this on a state level and federal level. I can't even imagine, I can't speak to it because I don't understand it. But that was a big part of why I joined, as alderman 3 years ago and as mayor this year, was to just understand better what was happening in our community because, I kind of turned, sit in the armchair quarterback all day long and talk smart about things you don't know anything about. So my goal was to get into the government and understand it better, and I'd always kind of been that servant-minded too, like even getting into business. I got into something where I was helping people recycle the material, and we learned it and ins and outs, and we recycle a lot of stuff. I mean, it's pretty amazing what we've been able to accomplish and be able to bring on employees and work through their issues and try to give them a better life also for the future. And that's part of what this is. So getting into the city government was just my way of, I guess, giving back, but also I enjoy getting involved in trying to solve problems for people and getting to build bridges, and that's a big part of what I'm doing. Sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming that I bite off more than I thought I was going to, but take it one day at a time, don't stress out too much, and get sleep at night, and it all works out in the end. But I've definitely enjoyed it, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve Wisconsin Rapids. Thank you.
And if you like drinking water from a fire hose, this is the job for you, so.
Wait, sorry, so you can actually get into it.
And I can attest to Senator Teston. He actually did. He worked an 8-hour shift at the Nakusa paper mill, had him do all kinds of things, including, remember when you get to push the 2,500-pound rolls as the sweat's rolling down. So he did well. The only problem was that he was there on a Friday. He started at 7, and I think at 3 we let him go. But that's just
I got there.
one of those things. So he did get 8 hours of good work. So anyway, we are right on time, which is cool. But it's now your turn. Please, however to do this, probably the easiest is just raise your hand. I will recognize you, and certainly if you want to ask any questions to our elected officials, again, we thank them for being here, but this is the time for you, or as they say in Atlanta, y'all. This time for y'all. They're all y'all. And don't everybody talk at once. We'll start back there with Rick, and then we'll go to Angel.
So Pat and Scott, besides tax relief, what are your priorities for the upcoming budget season?
Yeah, you're in joint finance, you go ahead.
So one thing that I'm monitoring closely right now is as it relates to our cost to continue in our Medicaid budget. So during the public health crisis, there was enhanced benefits that were allowed for our Medicaid programs in every state. And as a result of that, we saw our Medicaid enrollments expand by about 750,000 individuals. Now, at the end of the public health emergency, the federal DHS basically gave a directive to every state DHS that you basically have 12 to 14 months to what's called redetermination. Figure out who still qualifies for enhanced benefits, who does not. But what concerns me at present is that right now we're still wrapping up the redetermination here at the state level. So we don't actually know what the cost to continue for our Medicaid budget is going to be going this next biennium. Now, in this last budget, our cost to continue was just shy of roughly $600 million, which we paid those bills because the conversation that we were having within the Senate Republican caucus during that time was, well, as our population gets older, they're going to continue to take up a larger and larger percentage of our Medicaid budget. We can't just leave them hanging. And I think Julie will appreciate this. I mean, we've been having conversations right now as it relates to minimum rate bands for our providers who do things like adult daycare and day services, trying to set a minimum floor for what the compensation is. Because again, when we talk about pinch points within our healthcare system, this is one area where, and I think they're well-intentioned, I think they serve a purpose, but our managed care organizations here in the state, what was happening in previous budgets, we were trying to get through one-time money to get passed through for our frontline medical providers to get bonuses or pay increases. Well, oftentimes those bonuses got gobbled up, and it's unfortunate. But we're trying to create that minimum floor, which is going to help, I think, provide a lot of relief for a lot of our providers like OCI here in central Wisconsin. And I know that's going to be a topic of conversation going into this next budget.
For me, I've got a couple of big ones. So last session, I passed a bill that would give development by right. So if you're not familiar with this, where you could go into a community and have a project ready to go. If it meets all the zoning requirements at the town level at that point, the project is now a green light, right? Time to go, time to rock, we can't throw any more. And if you can't throw any more NIMBY stuff at it at that point, you've got your zoning in place, we're ready to get this project underway. So my goal is, we did a $500 million investment in housing and real estate bills from repurposing upstairs downtown office space into residential space, for taking old housing stock and repairing them, getting rid of asbestos and some lead pipe stuff and all this type of stuff. I want to see at least another $500 million thrown into this pool. It was supposed to be $1 billion housing package to start. I want to see the other $500 million this year to supercharge this program to get all these developers off of the sidelines now that we've greenlit the idea to get projects into communities. And secondly, our rural universities are struggling. So I've been at college universities for 12 years, like I mentioned. Our rural universities, our rural 4 years, UWSP, UW River Falls, UW Stout, et cetera, Platteville, are facing a pretty huge crisis on trying to make sure that they can still provide regional services to students all across state Wisconsin. And even more importantly, those are our pipeline to draw talent into the state quicker than anybody else can. So we really got to figure out a way to shore up our rural 4-year university system, get them back on solid footing, make sure that their mission and goals can be met. So those are my two biggest goals here, is in housing and in colleges.
I know you were mostly state, but maybe Congressman, if you could just make a couple comments on the federal budget, and then Matt, maybe from I know you're getting ready for your budget too. So.
Yeah.
What's a budget?
Hey, listen, the House of Representatives and the Senate are broken. We're supposed to pass 12 appropriations bills, and we haven't done that for I don't know how long. So what we're trying to do is get back to some very serious fiscal responsibility. And again, being on the Ag Committee, I focus on that a lot, and the Farm Bill has got to get done. 81% of the Farm Bill's SNAP benefits. And like I said, I was raised on food stamps. That's very important. 11% goes to production agriculture. And unfortunately, my Republican colleagues gripe about this Farm Bill a lot. But I remind them that we can always seem to find enough money to buy a new missile, but we can't seem to find enough money to make sure our farmers can feed us. And that is not okay. And I get in just as many fights with the Democrats as I do my Republican colleagues, and I think that's where we should be. So my number one priority, and it's a budgetary priority because it's a huge amount of money, is making sure that we get the Farm Bill passed. And unfortunately, that is predicated on Chuck Schumer's Senate getting us the text for their bill.
I feel like the mic should have dropped.
I would have bought him anyone.
Go ahead. I think, yeah, so the budget, as soon as the meet and greets ended in the beginning of my term here, went right into the budget cycle right away. I wanted to, as much as I thought I knew something about the budget, being on the Finance and Property Committee as the chair for a couple of years, it wasn't really the inside of what actually happens in the departments, and with Tim on the accounting side to figure out, all the different things that come that are voted on throughout 2024 and all those things that are going to be applied in 2025. So it's an interesting process. I learned a lot, and we're getting it whittled away to where it needs to be, and still having enough money figuring out for the roads so that everybody can drive without bouncing around on the roads. Don't worry, 8th Street's on the list. I've heard. 26, 26, just keep taking. So let's do it. So what I have learned too in the meantime is like the county is a huge resource, and I feel like it's kind of untapped at a lot of times, because I just, even having lived here for 20 years, like the amount of services that the community has or the county has is is amazing, and we have to be able to work, together closely to figure out how to get those services as much as possible, and they're doing a great job already, but if I can help as in my position to help bring more people to those services or more services to the people, I think that's going to be great. And again, it's all in place, all the parts are there already, and that's just kind of what I'm learning as I meet more people and try to bring all those different services together. It's been an amazing experience already in 6 months, so appreciate it.
Thank you. Angel, I promised you're next, and then you had a question over there too. We'll go with you next.
So I'll prep you, it's an energy question. Yes, I was just going to say, this is, so from a state and a federal perspective, right now Wisconsin is getting lots of inquiries about industry wanting to come here, specifically data centers and other large manufacturers that require power. Many of our communities are experiencing a 3 to 5, maybe even 10 years before they can really actually have the power needed for these potential businesses to come into their area. So thank you, Zachar, for mentioning the power that's here. So can you guys talk about maybe policies that you're working on or things that you're seeing from your perspective at the state and federal level that could help our rural communities address these issues, and even larger communities, because they have to wait 3 to 5 years as there's a supply chain issue to get a transformer, and then at the federal level there's a lot of regulation that takes at least 3 to 5 years to get through that red tape.
Looks like federal, no. All right. So I think one of the bigger mistakes we're making, and I've run this bill this session, a few bills this session, and it relates to solar and the controversy surrounding solar investment. I don't have a problem with solar investment, I have a problem with wind investment, but we have to start investing a lot more in our just basic infrastructure, and we don't do it. Because it's not catchy, it's not the sexy thing, it's not solar, it's not wind, but we don't do power generation in Wisconsin like we used to. We're a mass exporter in some areas of energy, but we need energy in central Wisconsin. So it's literally one of the most controversial things we dealt with this entire session that nobody probably heard of is energy-related issues, right? We're talking about the right of first refusal bill and all these things for developers and these companies that want to bring in power generation and distribute it better. But we are so new to the issue of energy, I would say, in the legislature, that I don't think enough people really understand how the issues impact rural Wisconsin. And that's going to be the biggest challenge, is trying to educate legislators on why energy issues matter, because we just don't ever talk about it. So I wish we could have better answers quicker, but supply is, supply chain is probably our biggest next problem. Trying to get these parts and components that are not manufactured in the United States anymore, it's a problem, right? When we rely on other countries to supply us with the box that goes around a transformer, or we don't use U.S. steel anymore. We're looking for minerals and deposits from other countries. We don't have access to the things that we need either, so we've got to do a better job of manufacturing our components.
From the federal level, I'll back up. So we're part of the MISO network in the district, which is and the third has got the largest concentration of rural co-ops in the state. So I pay very close attention to it. One of the reasons I was one of the 8 people that did not vote for the Limit Save Grow until I put in an amendment with 7 provisions, and they accepted 4 of them. One of them was to return the rural co-op tax credits so that you could use those tax credits to leverage capital at a lower rate. And I was trying to be a freshman, telling the Speaker of the House I'm not doing it. I don't care. Sarah Jane and I have 11 grandchildren, and we all want our grandchildren to have power, but we have children today, and the Biden administration is trying to skip a generation. So the technologies simply do not exist at this point to have 100% renewable energy. They just don't. So when you start looking at producing power from an ideological perspective as opposed to a practical perspective, you're going to run into what you're talking about right now. And that is the issue. So I just want to, I tell my friends and colleagues in Washington, D.C. that rocks are heavy, trees are made of wood, gravity's real, it's going to get 20 degrees below zero in the state of Wisconsin in the winter, and no one cares if you don't think that you should be able to use fossil fuels. So nothing, I'll be frank, nothing's going to change until we get a new administration that understands those 4 things. We want to talk about regulatory stuff. It took 3 years. They're like, let's have a wind farm in Iowa because there's a lot of wind. We're like, great, but you need the power in Wisconsin. So they allowed the permitting for the wind farm and then refused to allow the permitting for a conduit. So you can't miracle, like, does anybody have a lamp at home? I want you to unplug it and turn the switch on and see what happens, right? You need the frickin' cord. So we're working on this, but again, it's not a political statement. It's an honest statement. Nothing is going to change until we have people in the executive branch of the United States government who understand reality.
Okay, question. Did you have a question, sir? Oh, wait, so I got it. You're on.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to address this question to our state representatives. You both represent very rural areas. And there is, we want to attract more people to rural areas. We need a couple things. We need housing, but we also need schools that are financially viable. Over the past calendar year, over half of the school districts in Wisconsin have gone to referenda, and the majority of those referendums have been operating referendums. And that's for 2 reasons. 1, revenue limits, and number 2, the absence of an increase in state funding for, it was 3 or 4 years. What do you think is the temperature of the legislature right now in terms of looking at some serious reform of the school funding formula?
0. I mean, I'll just be point blank on it, sorry. I mean, you were there long enough too to know that when the discussion comes up on changing the state funding formula, it's a non-starter for the people that represent areas that win in the formula, right? So, I mean, when you talk majorities across the board, it may be a conversation piece with a closer majority this session. Maybe there's some conversation to be had, but just generally speaking, over my 7 terms, there's no appetite for it whatsoever because there are too many districts that are winners right now that would end up losing, right? So that is why we pull every trick out of the bag every session and I think as long as Pat's been there, I think we have historically funded our schools every session beyond the last one. And then even to the point that the governor took our budget, signed it, and created a veto that created a 400-year extension of school funding in perpetuity forever. So like there's literally probably no incentive for anybody to sign the state budget ever again. Like I don't even know if we really have to do one, right? It increased it in perpetuity for 400 years. But at the same time, we also did create the options for parents this session to use the choice program more. And regardless of what people's feelings on that are, I will never lock a student into having to go to a specific school just because of their darn zip code. Period. Not going to do it. So the idea that the choice program is going to disappear at some point, not while I'm there, not going to happen. When we talk about funding opportunities for our schools, I represent Adams Friendship School District. Probably the biggest rural school district in the state of Wisconsin, the most challenging district to help with funding because declining enrollment has been a problem for 20 years in Adams Friendship and most school districts in central Wisconsin. Less students equals less money, unless we offset that with categorical aids, which we have every state budget since I've been there. Transportation aids, especially for high-cost transportation areas. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on and all the things that we've done to fund public education in the last 6 state budgets that while it may not be enough to get us to the point where a referendum is absolutely the best thing for a community to have a discussion on. Any funding beyond what the state is able to provide should go to referendum for the citizens to take a vote on. It's plain and simple and clear as day to me that if we want to go above and beyond the funding that the state is going to allow, it should be a community conversation. And for the most part, those communities are open and welcome and open to having that conversation and voting yes on those referendums. It's not fun. It's hard work. But that's what every level of government that we represent does every day, to make hard choices. So to skip that in a local community or at a school board level, to say we shouldn't have to make a tough choice to have to ask our community for something, I think is a bridge too far for me to say that we're going to back away from doing that.
And I would say, so since I've been in the legislature since January 17, every budget that I voted for, we've made increases in the K-12 education. In fact, in this last budget, the state made its commitment of 2/3 funding for K-12. And one of the things that we did, because Scott's absolutely right, one of the biggest challenges that we have is that we have a school funding formula that is archaic, it is outdated. And every couple of years, an individual will come forward and say, let's do a Blue Ribbon Commission to address the school funding formula. And every time one of those commissions has come up, all they have done is nibbled around the edges because, to Scott's point, is those districts that make out like bandits under the current formula, they don't want to give up anything. Meanwhile, our rural districts like Adams Friendship, like Rapids, Spash, who are pretty frugal, they're being asked to do more with less, which is one of the primary reasons why in this last budget, we raised the ceiling for low revenue districts because we've heard it. I mean, the cost of inflation is impacting not just the individuals, but it's also impacting units of government, our school districts, our county boards, our villages, our towns, municipalities. And so, unless there's a willingness from folks in public education to actually sit down and have a real conversation about this, like Scott, I don't know if there's going to be an appetite to do it. And I would hate to see us in a scenario where we get everyone to a table and it's just, once again, we're nibbling around the edges and we're not actually accomplishing the intended goal, which is to have a formula that works for every district.
I mean, let me follow up a little bit too. Just, there are other models. We've definitely looked at other models, like letting the dollars follow the student. I mean, other states do this. I mean, it's going to take a lot of political capital, a lot of political will. Just say, hey, you're a taxpayer, get your tax bill, here's your check, go pay for your education. It's something we could do. I mean, it's very feasible that it is a political solution that is waiting for people to stand up and say, hey, I think the dollars should follow the student and let the dollars choose wherever they want to go. It's like I've always said in Madison on education from day one in this conversation is, hey, if I get a paycheck from the state government because I'm there every month, do they tell me I have to use it at Walmart? Or can I actually use it where I want to use it? I mean, there's strategies and ideas we could present, it's just I don't know what the political will is. That's right.
Hey, Pat smiling at me. Jason Knott, Pittsfield District School Administrator. I did not have it on my bingo card today to have Rapids and Marshfield mentioned in front of Pittsfield as a rural school district. All joking aside, Pat's come to Pittsfield several times, we've met. The one point I want to make, I agree with 90% of what you guys are saying. Pittsfield School District is in the bottom 15% in the state for school taxes. We are going to referendum. Absolutely agree with that. That's what we're doing. There are some components, though, that you talk about that are stacked against rural schools that when you talk about categorical aid, like that $325 per pupil for 400 years, we didn't see $325 because of the revenue limits. The per pupil limits for those districts that were fiscally responsible back in '92 when they set those limits, like Pittsfield, who has historically been a fiscally responsible school district.
Port Edwards.
Right, and many others, they set those limits lower. Those are the challenges because I would just say this about declining enrollment. If I have 18 kids in a classroom in Pittsfield or 13 kids, I still need a teacher in that classroom. So I agree, you guys know I've talked to both of you and I know you support public schools, but I would just say there are some challenges in the revenue limits. So sometimes we see that, it looked good. A lot of folks said there's a lot of money going into schools, but once again, there were the haves and the have-nots. And rural school districts are getting better. And I would say this, you guys have all hammered, apparently I'm the only one not into realty on this half of the, strong communities and strong schools are intertwined, right? So this isn't like we're confrontational, actually we're working with our cities and our towns in the Pittsfield School District. We're 371 square miles. We're not as expansive as Adams. We're the 15th largest in the state of Wisconsin. So I just wanted to say that I agree with 90% of what you're saying, but there are some challenges, some small pieces of that when you're in the bottom 15th percentile for school taxes, and we're still approving a $600,000 deficit budget, our school board did, an increase in expenses less than 1%. We had to go to referendum, and it's difficult for us to ask our taxpayers when we know they're hurting. So I just wanted to throw that in there. I know you agree, but I wanted to make that point.
Oh, thank you.
And I appreciate what you guys do as public servants, by the way, because it's challenging.
Hey, you're right there, so don't wait yourself out.
There's your bumper sticker.
I got a bunch of them.
Other questions?
Where's Phil? I need a printer now.
You have your chance to speak federal, city, state. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So this is Representative Krug and Senator Teston. We've had this conversation before. It's been brought up. It's related to child care. And we talk about economic development and we talk about workforce development. We know the impacts that child care has on that in communities, especially rural communities, and how it makes it more challenging in those child care deserts in there. When we look at, you talk about broken systems, whether it's the federal or the state level, child care is a broken system. And we know that necessarily just throwing gobs of money at the problem is not going to be the long-term solution to that. But the challenge is we know that as the current child care counts disappears, that there's going to be an impact on our child care industry. We're going to see child care programs closing. We're going to see rates that families are charged going to go up, which puts us in a predicament of when we have individuals leaving the workforce, and we don't worry about the unemployment rate, but we need to get them re-entered in the workforce. We're going to lose some of those valuable workforce participants. It's going to challenge our economy and our communities across the board. We need to get around the table to have a conversation. There's really 4 areas of impact on child care. Number 1, that's the providers. The providers need to be at the table. Our costs are going up. It doesn't quite cost $25 a gallon of milk yet, but we hope it never gets there. When we look at it, it's businesses. We need our business environment to be engaged in what we're doing and how does it look from a benefit package or supporting their workforce on child care costs. I believe it's legislative. There has to be some support. Birth to 5, most influential years in a child's life, and yet when we look at the support, and no offense to K-12 education, what do we do for our early childhood compared to our K-12 partners, and how does that package look? And then I think parents, they have to shoulder some of the responsibility, and there has to be some skin in the game in that area. So I guess when we look at it, who do we get around the table, and how do we solve this? Because it's a conversation that's going to continue to come up. Last biennial budget, it was a big topic. This coming up one, it's going to be another topic of conversation. So, how do we start to stop chipping away at the edges and really just have fruitful conversations on what this looks like, and not just look at throwing money at it, but really solve this problem?
Well, it would be, and I 100% agree with everything you just said.
I may vote for you just because you said that. Scott, unfortunately, you're not my district. I can't vote for you.
Whatever you want, I'll do it.
If we actually want to solve this issue, the number one way we're going to get there is to turn this from being a political bludgeon and actually sit down and have a conversation. Because it was pretty clear early on in the budget process, as the Joint Finance Committee was going around the state, that they're going to use this as a tool, folks on the other side of the aisle, to just beat the tar out of us. And they certainly did. I mean, everywhere we went, it was bad. And but again, when the governor continued to throw out the Child Care Counts program, and then again we got the tar kicked out of us over it. And when we put forth solutions that would actually help address some of these issues, we got vilified that it wasn't good, it didn't go far enough. Well, I think we can all agree that we're not going to solve this problem overnight. We didn't find ourselves in a child care crisis just by turning the flip of the switch. This has been a compounded problem that has been getting worse and worse year after year. And again, the governor's solution was, well, we're just going to give you a bucket of money to give you a crutch and help you get through the next X amount of years without addressing some of the root causes, primarily compensation for our early childhood educators. They make about, on average, $13 an hour. Now, I spent the day working at a child care center at UWSP through my On the Job series. I have a new profound appreciation for what those people do, because for about 6 hours, I
just figured out why Pat and Hannah don't have kids.
Connected the dots.
But it's tough. And, there's been conversation of what we can do on the regulatory front. Now, do I think deregulating the child care industry is the best way to go? But I do think there are some things that we can address that provide some flexibility for providers, whereas opposed to the current system right now, when auditors from DCF come in and they're trying to find everything they can hammer a provider on and looking to penalize them rather than work with them and make sure they have a better system and a better practice for not only themselves or employees, but for the kids. So I'm open to any and all suggestions. And so, like I said, now is the time to start meeting with lawmakers. And when it comes to this issue, I was willing to make investments in this last budget when it related to childcare, and we certainly made some. Didn't go as far as maybe I would have liked or some would have liked, but we're gonna have to start making incremental steps to addressing this and making sure that we have a model that is sustainable, not just for the taxpayers, but for the actual providers and the families that are utilizing it.
He's right.
Bumper sticker.
And a bumper sticker.
Other questions?
One per person.
I was gonna say, I'll tell them what the question is.
Yes, Angel, did you have a question?
Yes, I mean, I have lots of questions, but I'm only gonna ask two today, I promise. We were at a presentation yesterday that talked about the disruption in the supply chain. So this is gonna go to our congressman, so you guys can take a break over there. Specifically, they're talking about what's happening overseas. You made a comment about it, but I'd really like you to talk a little bit about how at the federal level, they're looking at how the supply chain is being impacted with the war that's happening over in Ukraine, and what efforts are we doing to help our local industry supply chains that are bringing that over to help alleviate that. I think we were told yesterday that it's adding $1 million in fuel because they're having to go around Africa instead of using those major waterways that are near some of those, the Red Sea. So I was just wondering, from your perspective, what conversations are you guys having, and how can we better prepare or tap into some of those things or advocate more, as these are going to really hit our businesses even harder here in the next 6 months?
Well, there's not just a war in Ukraine right now, there's a war in and around Israel.
Right.
And what you're referring to is the Suez Canal, which
Yes,
goes
thank
from
you.
the Red Sea into the Mediterranean. And yeah, so we've got to spend a lot more money because the Biden administration is hiding in the sand. The people that are causing the issue you're talking about are called the Houthi rebels, which are in Yemen. It's a capital city. I sent two, used to be a big secret, but when I was a SEAL, I sent two guys to Sanaa to start working this problem set against the Houthis while I was in Djibouti right across the Red Sea. Here's the problem. Biden administration, they delisted the Houthi rebels as a terrorist group immediately upon entering office. And those guys are launching ballistic missiles that are provided by Iran because the Biden administration removed the sanctions from Iran. So Iran is now selling oil and doing all this stuff. They're manufacturing and purchasing munitions, giving them to the Houthi rebels. The Houthi rebels are launching this against international shipping in the Red Sea, which makes them have to go south instead of north. If you go north, you wind up in the Mediterranean. If you go south, you have to go around the Horn of Africa. That's a direct result of incredibly poor strategic vision by the Biden administration and through projecting strategic weakness. So the Houthi rebels a little while ago launched a single drone attack and it hit an apartment building in Tel Aviv. They killed a single Israeli citizen. And then the Israeli government, the IDF, launched an air raid and destroyed about 2/3 of the Houthi rebels' capacity for exporting oil. And now they've stopped attacking Israel. That's how you deal with the problem. And the United States government, under the Biden administration with Lloyd Austin, who should be drummed out of the court, they're just setting conditions for people to run wild. And again, this is not going to change until we have a new administration that understands you can only have peace through strength. It's been proven over and over and over again. So yeah, we are in a tight spot. We have to get out of this tight spot. We have to focus on making sure that the United States of America is an energy powerhouse, and all of the input costs will be lowered when we have less expensive energy. Everyone here knows that. And then we have to make sure that when there are people who are interdicting international shipping, which is what you're discussing, or if they're threatening or killing Americans or our allies, that we utterly destroy them ruthlessly, and then bring them back into the fold. Who are two of our closest allies in the entire planet. Germany and Japan, right? Okay, and they're very good people. They were misled by a government. The Iranian people are very good people. The Persian people, I know a bunch of them. I work with them in DC. Fantastic people. So we need to get together. We have to establish international boundaries and then really enforce international law, which this administration has not been doing, and the cascading effect you're seeing every day, and the person that's living right down the street sees that at the gas pump. That's a direct result of failed Biden-Harris policies, period.
Rick, question? I didn't know we were allowed 2 questions.
Then we have to start.
She's allowed 2 questions.
Some
You
of
may
us,
never be asked back, but that's.
some of us are getting older, and I can understand in the election season, nobody wants to talk about Social Security and Medicare. But do you hear any back channel discussion about how to?
Hey, sure. Hey, listen, man. Everything you've heard from these BS ads about me trying to get rid of Social Security is just that. So it is. It's a lie.
But both parties are looking at things that are going to deplete the resources.
That's
as
not
opposed
true. No, that's just not true.
Eliminating taxes on Social Security is not going to deplete it?
Listen, what's your name? Yeah, you. Mike, how long you been working?
Forever.
15
There's Angel again.
So you've been working, and you've been working. You've been getting a hourly or a salary paycheck, right?
Correct.
And a part of that gets pulled out for FICA.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so you pay taxes on that already, right?
Correct.
Now you retire.
Yeah.
When you want to, and you're going to get that money back that went into an investment account, right? Social Security. Now you're going to get taxed on that again. No, I'm not okay with that. No, it's wrong. The federal government does not have a revenue problem, sir. The federal government has a spending problem. And when our seniors are worrying about where their next meal is going to come from, because some jackwad in DC wants to have a cocktail party, and they're gonna pay for that with your Social Security taxes? No. We have to stop that. Our seniors built this nation. They literally built the room we are in, and they must be respected. And people say Israel has the right to exist. They have the right to exist and in peace and security. And our seniors don't just have the right to exist, they have the right to exist in peace and security and dignity. So if we're going to talk about moving money around, it sure as hell is not going to come out of Social Security. Now, we have to reinvest some things. We do have to make sure that that money that you're paying into this fund is better spent or better invested so that it grows. But so that system needs reform, but in no way, shape, or form am I going to sign up to cut anybody's Social Security benefits at all. So let's be super clear. That is a cudgel, and it is a dog whistle that the Democrats have used for decades, and they're full of crap. And I don't, maybe you've noticed I'm a little more direct than a lot of people, and so we're just not going to do this. Social Security benefits for our seniors that built this nation are not on the table for me at all.
But it seems like it's very simple, right? You either raise the retirement age, you increase the level at which the Social Security taxes are taken out from. It seems like a simple solution to solidify the programs. But
here's a better solution. Remove the hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars of waste, fraud, and abuse from the federal government and reinvest it into the Social Security system.
Or allow people to make choices on how to invest their Social Security
Right.
themselves. Right.
I just wanted, this is, if you learn one thing from this meeting this morning, is I am not looking at reducing or getting rid of anybody's Social Security benefits at all. Is that clear? Oh, senior chief just came out. Okay, I'll put that.
Put the microphone here. Mayor?
You almost went off the table again. Time for a couple questions. We actually have two right behind each other, so go for it.
It's you guys.
You first, and then, ma'am, you'll be second, so
Do you
go
mind?
for it.
I'll just really quick. So,
Go for it.
Bob Siskoff from US Bank. I received a polling phone call survey a few weeks ago, which I thought was very interesting, and had 500 questions for about half an hour. Wow. It seemed like it was a lot.
It's 3 minutes.
The last question was, what was the most important issue to me? I thought, well, they're all important. Everything that you're talking about, everything that everyone's talking about here is important. But if the right people don't get elected to take care of these important issues, what's it going to matter? So how bad is our election integrity in central Wisconsin, the state of Wisconsin?
Bob,
What's
I'll tell
anyone-
you, right here, we are perfect. Literally, I mean, I say it
Another
tongue-in-cheek.
bumper sticker.
I say it tongue in cheek, but if you talk to Wood County, Adams County, Portage County, Juneau County, Monroe County, anybody within 60, 75 miles of here, not an issue whatsoever, right? I think the biggest challenge we had last session in election integrity was more perception than reality. And there are some things that happened that weren't supposed to happen. The Zuckerbuck influence in Brown County. We changed the Constitution, that can't happen anymore. The late night ballot issues in Milwaukee where people thought ballots were coming in after the count had been going one way and changed. It's not. And I'm going to do a really good job educating people this election cycle to say there's so many absentee ballots are outstanding, there's how many have been counted. Our biggest problem in the state of Wisconsin, something I tried to tackle this year, was we don't allow for the pre-processing absentee ballots. So when you vote by mail, we request your ballot and my vote. Derek's done a great job showing people how to do that. I appreciate everything he's done in his outreach with that. You get that absentee ballot, you fill it out, get a witness signature, get it back to your clerk, gets to go to your clerk's office, and then up until election day, sits on a shelf, right? And then they take all of these on election day, and they start processing on election day, opening them, putting them in the poll book, giving them a poll number, taking up all this time on election day. So by the time in big municipalities like Milwaukee, where there was 600,000 of these, try to process 600,000 anything from 8 a.m. until 10 p.m., you're not going to get it done. So we tried to do a bill. It was my number one priority this session. It was no fault of my state senator, but the state senate did not get it done. Where we would allow people like 40 other some states where an absentee ballot comes in, open it, process it, give it the poll number, put it in the polling machine. Doesn't tabulate, doesn't count, but it's safe, secure in the machine. We don't have to do it on election day. So by the time you go to bed on election night, you know who won the damn election. That was our biggest problem in 2020. We thought when we went to bed, somebody's winning the election. We woke up, somebody else won the damn election. All right. So
And
when
are
I
we
talk
going to
about
run into that again?
yeah, we're going to run into that again. Okay. I mean, so we besides that bill getting done, what we did was we gave Milwaukee a little bit more money to invest in more machines to be able to process things a little bit quicker. So it probably won't be 3 a.m. because the COVID election was an offshoot, where you had a lot more absentee ballots going on during the COVID election 2020 than you already are seeing in 2024. So there's already less. There's more machines in Milwaukee. It's still going to be the super close election we saw in every year in Wisconsin. Every presidential is going to be close. The last 12 years have been razor thin. It's going to be razor thin again. It's not going to be 3 o'clock. I'm guessing 1:30 in the morning still though. So you're going to have to stay up late or come hang out with us at the Ridges. Just a plug. Yeah, I know, right? Shameless plug, right? But I mean, that's the service that I want to provide to people in Wisconsin this year, this election cycle. So I will be putting it out on social media constantly, not only what's outstanding for absentee ballots here, but what they expect statewide when they start seeing results come in November 5th. Because contrary to the data geek Navy guy over here, I'm like the biggest data geek who's ever existed on election stuff. It's like I'm the Karl Rove of Wisconsin, I feel like sometimes, where you just got to know all the numbers and all the places. So that is my number one charge, to make sure that you understand what's going to happen on election night and when you can expect results. Because I wish we could do what Florida does. 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, you're done, you turn off TV, you go to bed, and they have 5 times more voters than we do in Wisconsin. It shouldn't be that complicated. I just need to get some friends of the state senate to go along with it, so 2028 doesn't end up like 2020.
And just personal, I always found that interesting, Scott, because if you mail in your ballot,
Yeah.
it says, but you can, starting next Tuesday, you can go to City Hall and you can vote
Yeah.
Absentee on a machine or however,
Yeah.
obviously.
Well, in person, early afternoon.
And obviously those are getting counted because they have to.
Exactly. I wish
So what's
we should.
the,
You should come to the state side and testify. We're gonna bring you over. I mean,
I'd be happy to go down.
yeah, I mean, you're right.
Oh my gosh, by golly.
It's wonky stuff, but we'll figure it out.
We have a final question, ma'am. Are you still ready? You're taking notes, so give it to these guys.
I'm Kim Nicholas from Lux Property Partners. I'm from the realtor side of the room.
There you go.
You know, right now people are facing an incredibly low inventory of homes on the market, high inflation year after year. And we talk about affordable housing a lot in sessions like these, or even up at the Capitol on Realtor Day. And usually it comes down to creating apartments or new construction. And it leaves a huge segment of just regular folks who want to own their own home. We talked about how Wisconsin Rapids wants a quality of life so that they can attract manufacturers. And I'm not saying that there isn't room for apartments or duplexes or new construction, because there certainly is. But we also have to create a quality of life. We know that home ownership statistically creates very committed citizens, right? If you own your own home, you have great pride in where you live. So I guess my question is this: can you be more specific how we're creating affordable home ownership opportunities for people in the state of Wisconsin and creating that American dream?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say that we spent $500 million and gave people all kinds of money to try to do all these things, but it doesn't force people to make those choices, right? So I think the bigger thing besides spending the $500 million and investing on Main Street redevelopments and upgrading old housing stock, I think the biggest thing was the development by right bill that I got done. Working with Wisconsin Realtors Association so that if somebody had an idea for a subdivision, say in Saratoga, anybody from Saratoga, I don't want to pick on Saratoga too much, but there's been some zoning issues in Saratoga over the years. I know, he's the chief.
He's armed.
Yeah, right. I don't want to pick on too many communities, but there have been zoning issues in Saratoga, for example, not in housing, but in other things. But when neighbors start seeing developers come into an area and say, no, I don't want that development, that's our biggest problem, right? And people saying, well, this 40 acres wasn't being used for anything before and somebody else wants to use it now, but I always ATV'd there. It's the problem we had in Rome when we created Sand Valley. But you can't build that. I used to go ATV in there. I used to go deer hunting there. That's mine. It's not yours. You should have bought it. You didn't buy it. We do this on the county board in Adams County all the time, where we wanted to create some space for a county forest, right? And we go and we make a purchase, and people are like, well, that's where I deer hunt. I get it. We'll help you figure out another place to go. But NIMBYism is our biggest problem when it comes to development and having affordable housing and having manufacturers be able to come to our communities. Because people say, no, I always want everything to stay exactly the way it was. Well, and I'm going to use, this is my best bumper sticker of the whole day.
Here we go.
Guys, write this one down, right? So I tell people this all the time. This relates really well to this. I've been married twice and I have 6 kids. I don't get what I want. Why should everybody in our communities always get everything that they want, right? We have to be open to ideas. We have to be open to development. We have to be open to people making changes and create opportunities. So this development by right bill is, I think, the biggest thing that's going to impact housing in the state of Wisconsin for the next 10 years. Because we gave communities 2 years, set whatever rules you want. From that point on, we're not going to allow NIMBYism to go against what your zoning regulations are. You're going to be locked into place on what your rules are. 2 years to get it done. But after that, it's going to be free and wide open. If you want to build a subdivision in Grand Rapids, because that's what the rules are, we're not going to let the neighbors between 48th and 64th say you can't do it. We just have to be open to development. So,
from the federal government perspective, talk about raw materials and inflation. The Biden administration is not enforcing our trading agreements. So like when we're trying to get lumber from Canada, for instance, they're kind of eating our lunch across the board. So first and foremost, the federal government has to stop injecting capital into a market with scarcity, and that's going to help inflation go down. And then we have to enforce the trade agreements we have with our partners, especially in North America, but around the world, so that we set a level playing field so the folks that do want to develop something can afford to do so. And that's kind of a big hand, little map thing. But from the federal government, that's what we're actually working on. But if the House changes and we don't get the Senate back, and we don't get the White House back, all this it's meaningless. We can sit here and scream at each other to our blue face until you have people that acknowledge reality and understand that, in fact, not all development is bad. You know, you live in a house, at one point that was a field, right? So we're working very diligently to try to get this done. And then I'm going to take a point of personal privilege. I'd like to thank Pat and Scott for making sure that we don't live in California. Yeah, no Minnesota, my Wisconsin. I'm very serious about this. I am your congressman, most of you, but first and foremost, I'm a Wisconsinite. I live in Prairie du Chien, and Dave is my mayor, and he does a great job for Prairie, so thank you so much for everything you're doing on the local and state level, because I live here, and I'm happy to live here because of you three, so thank you very much. Thank you.
On that note, let us give a nice round of applause to all of our... I don't know, Scott, if you have a show today or you have something?
If this is North Korea, you'd also be clapping.
So we would like to thank them, and we absolutely need to thank our friends at Domtar. Thank you, Dave. Our friends at Mid-State Technical College for this awesome everything that you have out here. I worked here many years ago, and man, has it come full circle. It's awesome. Our friends at U.S. Bank there in the middle, and also our friends at J.H. Findorf and Son. You're back there yet. Thank you very much. It's Friday. Yep, it's a casual Friday. We cannot do these things literally without your support. Thanks to all our friends at Heart of Wisconsin. Thank you to Wisconsin Rapids Community Media for being here and for all you do, broadcasting all types of meetings, because people do watch those and they certainly get good information. And if the food was good, which I know it was, thank Kathy and her team at Chatterbox. Thank you for attending. I'm giving you back, according to my script, you're getting an additional about 8 minutes, so I guess you can thank me. Anyway, have a good day. Whomever, whichever side of the aisle you are on, please, I don't need to say this, but please, it's all about voting. And thank you, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.